Hey, it's Coach John here. Today we're moving out of the kitchen and into the bedroom. Now I know what you're thinking, and no, we're not talking about that. That's cardio, and we're not talking about cardio right now. So sleep. Sleep is one of those things that we wish we got more of, but we feel like we already don't have enough time in the day for this, right? And it's something that we take for granted, and we basically try to fuel our tired brains with caffeine to compensate, right, for our lack of quality sleep. And look, at this point, if we were to withdraw caffeine from the world, I think the entire developed world would collapse as we know it. And look, I know we joke about it, but that's a pretty dire state of affairs when you stop and think about it, right? How many people do you know who say, I don't feel human until I've had a cup of coffee? Some people it's like 4 or an entire pot of coffee. And look, we kind of joke about it, right? But what we're actually saying is we're exhausted and we're sleeping horribly. And I want you to think about using caffeine like a credit card. You know, you're borrowing energy from the future to pay for the present. And at some point in time, if you don't pay back in the form of recovery and rest, well, you know how credit cards are brutal with their interest rates? Sleep deprivation and how damaging it is to your health basically makes credit card companies look like saints. You age faster, you accelerate degeneration, and you dramatically increase your chances of Alzheimer's, dementia, cancer, diabetes, heart disease. Every major lifestyle diagnosis that would basically make your heart stop in the doctor's room if he told you you had this, you increase your chances dramatically, right? Like, you know that when you're sleep deprived, your metabolism can function up to 30% slower. You're more likely to store carbohydrates as fat because your sluggish metabolism can't use them effectively. And you might not think it's a big deal right now. You might think, well, I just got to take care of this, or I just got to do this, or I just got to get. No, look, something like dementia, it can take 20 years to get established. And by the time the symptoms show up, it's basically too late. And am I trying to scare you? Yeah, I am. Just a little bit. I need you to understand how important this is. This is not a joke, you know? So we, as a society, we already sleep terribly, and it's partly because of just how rushed and stressed we are, this feeling of constant pressure, of overwhelming, crushing pressure to try and keep up. And by the time we get to bed, we're so wired from the amount of screen time we've had that it's nearly impossible for our brains to shut off. We're more sleep deprived than human beings have ever been in human history, and it's taking a huge toll on our health and our waistlines. And look, this is a topic I could spend quite a bit of time on, but I want to focus on how sleep matters for fat loss in particular. So sleep is so important that it will be the foundation for everything else you do. This is on your weight loss journey and every other aspect of your life. If you want to use calories more effectively, you need more sleep. If you want to build more muscle and burn more fat, you need better quality sleep. Sleep is the foundation for your health, and I don't know if I can make this any more clear. So now, let's say you wake up in the morning, you're sleep deprived, you maybe got 5.5 hours last night. Your body perceives that as being under threat. It's a major stressor, and this elevates cortisol. So cortisol is already elevated in the morning. That happens naturally to wake you up. And sometimes we think of cortisol as this boogeyman, but look, we need some cortisol. But the problem is when it's chronically elevated because of stress, this starts to create nasty effects. Mood swings, blood sugar swings, spikes and crashes. This dramatically increases cravings because we constantly feel tired, we're moody, cranky, hangry, and exhausted. And we're in this state. You better believe we ain't reaching for like broccoli and spinach here. We're reaching for what I call high bliss foods, absolute junk foods, because our brains are desperate for some kind of pleasure in this state of exhaustion and misery. Now, look, enough of the doom and gloom. I think I've made it pretty clear what the problem is. Now it's time we start thinking about solutions and how we can set ourselves up for a good night's sleep, right? Now, when we talk about a good night's sleep, we're talking a bare minimum of 6 hours, but ideally it's 7.5 to 8.5 hours sleep. And if right now you're thinking, I don't have time for that, you better start looking at changes to your schedule. We need at least 4 90-minute cycles for a night's proper rest. And that's already 6 hours. So once you factor that in, and then you add in fall asleep time, the time we wake up, maybe you wake up once in the night, you can see how easily this adds up to 7 or 8 hours. So there's a couple things that we can implement right away that will start making an impact. So I want you to start doing these things tonight before you start going to bed. First off, you need to reverse engineer your sleep, and you probably already know what time it is you need to wake up. So with some basic math, you can figure out what time you need to be in bed with the lights out in order to get 7 or 8 hours sleep. Now, in order to get quality sleep, you need to get your bedroom environment set up correctly, right? So it's important that we make sure our bedroom is dark enough. It's the darkness that signals to the body to produce melatonin, and darkness helps us achieve deep sleep. So you may even want to consider at some point in time investing in a sleep mask. Like I've got one here. I think the brand name is catchy, like eyebrows or something like that. Very clever. So yeah, here we have it. It's like a bra for your eyes, basically. It's very soft, very comfortable. Yeah, I started wearing it and it makes a huge difference. So if you are going to invest in like a sleep mask, you actually want it to be comfortable, like one you're going to wear and use, right? So now look, I'm not saying you have to rush out before tonight and go and buy a sleep mask, but I want you to think about that seriously. And the goal here tonight is to get your room as dark as possible. Get your phone away from your bed, flip it over, face down, turn your alarm clock facing away from your bed. And the next thing we want to think about is the temperature of your room, right? So look, nobody wants to be, shivering away, shaking under your blankets because your room is so cold. But the actual ideal temperature for humans and sleeping is approximately 18 degrees Celsius. So that's about 64, 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And if we get too hot at night, it actually makes it difficult to fall into deep sleep. Now, if it's not the middle of winter and look, the weather's reasonable, you might want to crack your bedroom window for an hour before bed and get some fresh air in there as well. So now let's talk about a pre-bed ritual. So for most people, and I'm guilty of doing this myself, we sit in the room before bed, we're on our phones. Lots of people even have TVs in their bedroom and fall asleep to watching Netflix or watching a movie, and this is absolutely terrible for getting a good night's sleep. These screens emit blue light, and it's blue light in particular. It signals to our brain that it's daytime. Blue light suppresses the production of melatonin, and that's the hormone that tells our brain to begin preparing our body for sleep. And so this is why we talk about getting off your devices at least 30 minutes before bedtime. So now, in addition to that, there's a couple things you can do. For example, there's some apps that I use. One is called Flux. It's spelled F.LUX, and I use that for my computer. So that starts to dim the light in basically the same rhythm as the sun sets in my time zone. It's actually pretty cool, right? So now most phones do come with a blue light filter built in. I'm sure most people probably switch it off, but if not, you might want to consider getting an app like Night Shift or one called Blue Light Filter that gradually, again, it reduces the blue light and filters it out, right? Now, I don't want you to think that, getting these apps compensates for being on your screens late at night, but at least it's not making the problem much, much worse, right? And look, probably right now, some of you are thinking like, what on earth am I going to do if I'm not on my phone? And I want to tell you about an old-fashioned technology called books. I'm serious though. Many of my clients have actually started reading books in the evening, and they're reporting dramatically better sleep quality. Maybe you don't want to read a book. You could have a bath or a warm shower. You could even try conversing with other human beings that might live in the same dwelling as you if you don't live alone, right? Like maybe some light yoga or stretching. Like there are things that you can do to occupy your time in the final 30 to 60 minutes before you turn the lights out. You don't have to be on your phone. And in fact, if you want to have the most effective sleep for fat loss, you should be getting off your phone 60 minutes before bedtime. But for the sake of this challenge and not trying to knock you too badly out of routine, I'm saying at least 30 minutes before you hit the lights out, get off your screens. So now, there are some supplements that can be helpful for sleep, and I'm going to talk about a couple of them here, but I just want to put in this little disclaimer. If you constantly have to rely on like sleep supplements to get better sleep, that's an indication you need to address another area of your life, such as stress management. And I don't want to talk too much about this one either, but sleeping pills. If you're using them, you might want to figure out a way to, with the advice of your doctor, get off of them. And I'm serious about that. The long-term research for sleeping pills is terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. So, some of the most, one of the most commonly well-known supplements is melatonin. And look, it's very cheap. Like a bottle like this here. So now, interestingly, studies have shown that small doses of melatonin, like 0.5 milligram, are more effective than 5 milligrams, right? And keep in mind, if you're stressed out and your cortisol levels are high, and cortisol tends to suppress melatonin production, right? So this can actually lead to you, let's say you take some melatonin, but you end up feeling tired but wired, and then melatonin becomes not very effective, right? So another one that can help you relax is magnesium. Now, when you're going to get magnesium, it's pretty inexpensive. You want to look for one. This one that I showed you here is called magnesium citrate, but you could look at something like magnesium glycinate. The one you basically want to avoid is the cheapest one, and it's called magnesium oxide. But basically, we don't absorb more than 80% of it, so it's basically useless taking it, right? So there are some good sleep supplements out there. There's one that I take called Lights Out Sleep. This one's made by Allmax Nutrition. I find it to be a very effective sleep supplement, but yet again, I don't take it every single night. And maybe you don't want to take a sleep supplement. You could consider something like lavender spray on your pillow just before bed. Maybe sipping a mug of chamomile tea. There's quite a few ideas I've listed here for you to try. So the task for you today is this. I want you to start figuring out how you can implement some of the things I've listed here and share what you're going to do to get a good night's sleep. Probably the most important ones are getting your room dark, getting your bed ready and your bedroom ready before sleep. Maybe that means getting some fresh air in there and getting off your screen at least 30 minutes before bedtime. Okay? I look forward to seeing what you post in the group. Let's start getting some better sleep.